Hello and welcome to the program. Less than a week after the Inter-Korean Summit in Pyongyang, world leaders gathered in New York for the UN General Assembly. On this week's A Road to Peace, we'll break down the latest efforts made in summit diplomacy towards peace and denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula.
At this year's United Nations General Assembly, U.S. President Donald Trump said he has engaged with North Korea in a, quote, bold and new push for peace. Now, attention is turning to his potential second meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, which he said will take place quite soon. What will be the date, venue, and possible agenda items for their summit talks?
For today's discussion, we're joined by Dr. Lee Sung-yeon of the Sejong Institute. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, Dr. Lee, just a year ago, President Trump said at the UN General Assembly that he'll totally destroy North Korea if the U.S. were threatened. And this year, things are totally different. He says he's looking for a way for peace on the Korean Peninsula. How would you say this is? Would this be a positive change? It's definitely very dramatic.
Well, you answered the question you raised. That means that you don't need any commentator like me. But I totally agree with you. It's a positive change. Moon also said that something like magic happened for the last 1 year. And I think Moon went to New York to explain the magic, which is hard to believe. And I think a key word that penetrates all of this magic is peace. And UN is a place for peace to prevent a war and spread peace. So I think it was a good moment for Moon to explain what happened for the last 1 year. And also the UN has a role to play and has a role to contribute to peace-making process.
We'll be having a second summit with Chairman Kim in the not-too-distant future. Secretary of State will be dealing with that subject, but
U.S. President Donald Trump has made it clear that his second meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is drawing near. Less than a week after the Inter-Korean Summit in Pyongyang, South Korea and the U.S. held a summit on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York. During the talks, President Moon Jae-in briefed his U.S. counterpart on the outcome of a summit meeting with Kim.
남북 간에 좋은 합의를 이루었고 또 북한의 비핵화에 대해서도 진전된 합의가 있었습니다.
He also delivered the North Korean leader's personal message to President Trump, adding that Kim conveyed his unwavering trust and expectations in the U.S. president.
트럼프 대통령과 조기에 만나서 트럼프 대통령과 함께 비핵화 과정을 조속히 끝내고 싶다라는 희망을 밝혔습니다.
President Trump welcomed the message and said he will soon announce the time and venue of a second one-on-one meeting with Kim.
I think within a pretty short period of time that'll be announced. It will be location to be determined, but we're both very much looking forward to having it. It will be between North Korea and the United States. It will be similar to the format we had before, most likely a different location.
During the 85-minute meeting, the leaders of South Korea and the U.S. reportedly discussed in depth a formal declaration ending the Korean War. Meanwhile, the day after he sat down for talks with President Moon, President Trump addressed the UN General Assembly. At the UN gathering in 2017, he lambasted North Korea.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself. We will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
But just a year after, his narrative has done a 180.
With support from many countries here today, we have engaged with North Korea to replace the specter of conflict with a bold and new push for peace.
전쟁 종식은 매우 절실합니다. 평화 체제로 가기 위해 반드시 거쳐야 할 과정입니다. 앞으로 비핵화를 위한 과감한 조치들이 관련국 사이에서 실행되고 종전선언으로 이어질 것을 기대합니다.
On this week's A Road to Peace, we take a look at the outcome of the recent Moon-Trump summit and discuss prospects for a second North Korea-U.S. summit.
Now, speaking of President Moon's efforts, he did a lot of things at the UN General Assembly to dispel the skepticism toward North Korea's determination to denuclearize. Would you say his efforts were partially successful?
I think it's more than partially successful, but then we have to be very objective. My conversation with colleagues in DC was that about 99% people were skeptical. And I think it's very important for President Moon, who carries a good credibility, a good standing in terms of reputation, personally to explain opinion makers in New York, Washington, D.C., think tanks, and also answer questions from them. I think this is a good public diplomacy to let people know what happened, and particularly as a person who spoke with Kim Jong-un and met with Kim Jong-un for 3 times this year. So this is a very good gesture that helps the process for peace.
Right. Now, President Trump also said there will be possibly a second meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un very soon. Do you think this will be okay for the United States? Because there are concerns that this could be a premature concession to North Korea, and he also has a lot of political issues domestically to concern himself and also his administration. What's your take on that?
I think you raised a very important question. So far, the public narrative is that what North Korea has to do. But then the other part of the question is that what U.S. needs to do when Kim Jong-un also has to manage his domestic politics, and what U.S. Is willing to offer as a concession for North Korea's giving up nuclear weapons. And I think it's very important, and also it's good that, again, for Moon to be there, not just to persuade the presidency and presidential staff and advisors, but also the greater public, U.S. public. If Trump is the only person in the United States who agrees with this deal and the rest of the United States as a society disagrees, that is not good. Why? Because at the end of the day, the deal moves to a declaration of end of the war. Right. And then the next step and final step is peace treaty. Peace treaty requires support from the 2/3 of the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate listens to their constituents, the public. So it's very important to manage, not just to work on the U.S. opinion makers and U.S. government, but also work on the U.S. public at the same time. So that's why I think Moon did a very good job and necessary job, and also in terms of what needs to be concessions to make each other. I think that's why Trump and Kim need to meet to figure out the details, and Moon paved the way for possible another summit between Kim and Trump.
Then what about the timing of the next North Korea-U.S. summit? Because U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo mentioned earlier that they will have the summit possibly in October, but even later. Do you think it'll happen before the midterm elections or after?
Scholars like me, we have been debating that. Actually, our initial theory was that when the talk was stalled, we thought, given the fact that talk was stalled and midterm elections are coming, probably it'll happen after the midterm. But then there was a revival of a good atmosphere and the North Korea and South Korea summit, and we expect that probably it'll come sooner. But then we are about to enter October, and midterm election is in November. I think 1 month time is a little bit too short to prepare all the details of a summit at the presidential level. But then, if Trump is sure about that Kim will make a significant concessions, and if Trump feels that sure about that will help and boost his popularity for the midterm elections, things could happen. As what Trump said, all the options are on the table here.
Right. Now, President Moon at the UN General Assembly said he wants more international support from other countries. What can the rest of the world exactly do to support South Korea's efforts to achieve peace on the Korean Peninsula?
Moon actually so far played the role of UN when it comes to North Korean issue, preventing the war, because last year we're talking about war.
Right.
Now we are talking about peace. But Moon is our president. I want Moon Jae-in back to our country. He fulfilled his role, and he did a great job. And he went to UN. Now UN also has a role to contribute to this. But then Moon has this general audience, the UN General Assembly, but Moon also has a target audience when it comes to the real significance and who will be the main players, that is United States. And I think that's why he went to New York and gave the speech, and also gave a talk in one of the think tanks, Council on Foreign Relations. I think UN is the place where UN Security Council meets, and they are the place where UN sanctions are decided. And UN Council is also a place where a lot of important decisions about the peace-building process for the future of Korean Peninsula will be made, including giving us support to the peace process. But then, having said that, as I said, I think his main target audience is U.S. government and U.S. public. And so far, Moon played a role as a mediator. But then, essentially, it is the matter between North Korea and the United States. Right. And the U.S., a lot of people in U.S. remain skeptical. So Moon went there, explained to them what happened. Confidence building measures are necessary. And also Moon emphasized the need for the declaration of the end of war. I think those kind of things that U.S. will, I think, more positively, proactively consider after listening to Moon. Having said that, what U.S. can do right now for North Korea is that, actually this is like an open secret. Actually, there is very little for U.S. should do. Really? Because what U.S. should do is, in terms of legal aspect, is to lift economic sanctions imposed on North Korea, which cost nothing. After North Korea's denuclearization, international community will support North Korea economically, but then it will be the countries surrounding North Korea, South Korea, Japan, China, or something like in Southeast Asian country like Singapore or Vietnam. These neighboring countries are the countries that usually do business with North Korea. So U.S. doesn't have actually much to make concessions to North Korea, but U.S. has the international authority and symbolic importance when it comes to give the significance of the agreement in dealing with North Korea. So I'm scratching my head why U.S. put such a high bar in terms of declaration of war, which is mere symbolic, while it's along the way there will be much more important peace treaty we have to deal with. So it's a roadblock that U.S. also may consider that in terms of moving forward the negotiations with North Korea, because North Korea has been demanding and North Korea has been making at least 4 symbolic gestures for competency. I think U.S. also could offer some more symbolic tension-thawing gestures and confidence-building measures as well.
Now, in his interview with Fox News, President Moon Jae-in also said that there could be a declaration to the end of the Korean War, but also humanitarian aid and a possible U.S. Liaison Office in Pyongyang. Could these things really happen in the near future, and are these what Kim Jong-un really wants?
Well, I haven't spoken with Kim Jong-un yet.
No, you haven't.
So
Not
I
yet.
don't know. But these are things that are not new. Actually, we've been talking about this for at least the last 20 years. Liaison Office in Pyongyang as a first step to eventually set up a U.S. embassy in Pyongyang. Economic aid, also North Korea joining WTO, Asian Development Bank, all these international organizations. Actually, these are not special things. These are the ordinary organizations where ordinary countries just join. What means is that we are helping North Korea becoming an ordinary member of the international society. So there is nothing special about this. But then, having said that, trust building is really necessary. It has been an underestimated item. And when it comes to setting up a liaison office and eventually U.S. embassy in Pyongyang, I think it has a lot of benefits to U.S. as well in terms of communicating directly with Pyongyang right there in Pyongyang. Also, getting to know what the North Korea's next steps might be. So it has also good intelligence aspects as well for benefits for United States as well. And these are the things that countries normally do. I think we are heading into the right direction.
Now, we've been talking about declaring the end to the Korean War. It was definitely something that was discussed at the Moon-Trump summit in New York, but also it's going to be highly discussed for the upcoming North Korea-US summit, right? So do you think this will be achieved within the end of this year?
We'll see. But at least President Moon Jae-in's perspective, he wants to achieve it by the end of the year. I think we have to look at the domestic political calendar of the United States. Having said that, I think it will be the benefits of Pyongyang to also work hard to achieve it as soon as possible. Why? Because after the midterm elections, the U.S. domestic political cycles will move toward another direction, and where the Trump's interests, which is actually personal interest, actually driving force, actually probably it's the only force that has been enabling this kind of a dialogue and outreach to Pyongyang. After midterm election, the significance of the North Korean issue will be diminished. I think that's what I'm afraid about. So if I were Kim Jong-un, and if Kim Jong-un has a strategic thinking, it's not a time to play. It's time to really get to the real speaks of the denuclearization, also get what it wants, making a deal with the Trump, who happens to be the only U.S. president, sitting U.S. president in history, who is willing to sit down with the North Korean leader. So this is a very precious opportunity. We are talking about, whether Kim Jong-un changed or not, but then we are not talking about whether U.S. has changed or not. U.S. has changed, at least under this window of opportunity under Trump. So North Korea should make best use of the window of opportunity that is given by Trump, probably make a significant progress toward a denuclearization deal by the end of the year. I think this is doable.
So North Korea is really on a tight schedule, and to really achieve what it really wants, it's going to have to give up its inventory of all its weapons to the United States. Is that correct?
Yes.
That would be the significant factor for their relations?
The American political science community, which also influenced the policy thinking, heavily driven by so-called theory building, or they are very specific to methodologies, manual. We talk about, Japanese people pay a lot of attention to manuals. Actually, it also applies to Americans as well. They have a manual for denuclearization. Step one, reporting the list, and then inviting the inspectors, verification, and then dismantlement. And these are the cookbooks that U.S. political science community has created, and North Korea has to follow according to this manual, this cookbook. The interesting thing is that North Korea has not been following this rule book, so it makes Americans scratch their head. So that's why they say, North Koreans are not serious about denuclearization. I disagree. North Korea has been doing its own way without following the protocols, the rule books, the manuals that has been set up by the United States. And that's why it makes Americans a little bit unaccustomed to, because U.S. always are the ones who used to call the shots, and you follow these manuals. U.S. told Libya, you follow this dismantlement of nuclear weapons rule books. But then North Korea is, in a way, self-denuclearizing itself. It declared itself, it took its own initiative to stop missile tests, nuclear tests. It voluntarily also stopped they dismantled the missile testing sites, and a sort of things, is a series of things. So it's a little bit unusual for international IAEA inspectors and rules that when you see someone who is not following the rules, following the cookbooks. But then I think the important thing is that at the end of the day, whether this food is delicious or not, without following the steps according to the cookbook, whether this denuclearization that North Korea has been showing and displaying will also achieve the final goal of denuclearization of North Korea or not. I think we have to be a little bit open-minded and see where things go. At the same time, we also have to look at the previous rule book. At the same time, we also have to be creative as well.
I see. Now, as my last question to you before we let you go, where do you think denuclearization talks are headed from now on?
It stands this way. I mentioned about rule book. There is a rule book here, these different countries have different rule books in terms of looking at North Korea's denuclearization. For South Korea, I think we planned it for the spring summit, inter-Korean summit. It was about politics. And we prematurely expected that denuclearization will be decided at least during the spring summit, so that we could focus on economy during the fall summit, which just happened. But then the denuclearization, the verification of peace declaration steps a little bit became very complicated. So our schedule is a little bit delayed. I think it also, in a way, same to Americans as well. They thought that denuclearization will happen in one single meeting in Singapore when diplomatic copulation between Kim Jong-un and Trump happened, and then giving birth to denuclearization. But as you know, having a baby takes 10 months at least. It doesn't take one night, just tomorrow you see a baby. It takes time. Even the armistice agreement from the Korean War took more than 700 times of negotiations. So I think we have to be realistic. It takes time, political courage, smart thinking, willing to use both carrots and sticks, also meetings, lots of meetings are needed to make this denuclearization happen. And I think it's somewhat encouraging that Trump said that he won't be bound by any short time frame, short timeline. And I think this is the right approach, because that means that you don't have any deadline where a deal is not made, then you just walk away. That is not a very good, promising outcome that we want to see. I think it shows that Trump is willing to deal with this tough challenge. And that Trump used to say about peace through strength. He showed the strength. Now he is trying peace through negotiations. This is very new and also very admirable. And there are a lot of criticisms, domestic criticisms about Trump. But then Trump, when it comes to denuclearization of North Korea, Trump might become an accidental hero. And Trump is the first one who sat down with Kim Jong-un, willing to tackle the problem. And that's why, in a way, the unpopularity of Trump is a kind of a stumbling block. That's why he is domestically unpopular when he approaches North Korea. But then I think we have to separate a person who is domestically unpopular doesn't necessarily mean that he cannot solve an important international issue like North Korea. It's a thorny issue, and it takes a big courage and big heart to solve and tackle this problem.
And I guess all we need is some perseverance and a leap of faith, and we'll be able to see all these things unfold in front of us. Thank you, Dr. Lee, so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Messages of peace and denuclearization are being shared around the globe at this year's UN General Assembly. Hopefully, they will be achieved through sincere dialogue between North Korea and the US. Well, this is all we have for you today. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.